was when we first got involved. I mean, I'm sure she was prior, but she first figured out that she was doing drugs. I don't know if she really was when we first got involved. I mean, I'm sure she was prior, but she claimed she wasn't. She one morning woke up and couldn't stand up. She was so dizzy, she couldn't get down to the bathroom in the morning, which was 8 flights down. And so I call it ambulance. This is in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and they kept sending police cars. Whenever somebody calls an ambulance side, it's inside. It's police car, because they immediately do violence, which kind of was, Well, finally, we got her to the hospital, and after a couple days, I looked at the clipboard on her bed, on the end of her bed, and it said junkie alcoholic. And that's when it really struck me that, I was involved with something I didn't realize what I was getting involved with. At that point, it hurt so much inside, the pain. She was so messed up. I really wanted to figure out what was drawing all these people onto heroin. It was a very mystical sort of underworld. I remember these guys, these friends of mine, pop for the first time. We go into the bad part of Lower East Side, we go into these doorways, and there's all these Puerto Ricans and stuff there with baseball bats, and everyone will be lined up. You put your money through a little hole, and you put your money in a bucket, and you go up into the top floor of an abandoned building, and lower it down, and lower it down in the bucket. And just the fact that we could get that stuff, and it always had a stamp with some sort of name like body bag or poison. It would say, it almost was so surreal, and it was really an underworld. It was a really dark scene. It almost seemed like it was an underground thing that was accepted in that city. You'd see people in suits lining up, people that looked like been on the streets their whole life. It was a very bizarre thing, and I was just fascinated with it. I really was drawn to it, even though in the beginning I was terrified by it. I remember the first 2 times I did heroin, my friend Tony had gotten me a bag, and it was called Bullet, and I snorted it. It came in a little plastic package that was heated. It was hard plastic, and it was sealed. And then you cut that open, and there'd be a little another plastic baggie with a glassine envelope with the name stamped on it. And my friend Tony split it with me, and I snorted it. And I was walking down St. Mark's, and St. Mark's looked like a boat. The street was rocking from side to side, and I kept throwing up and throwing up and throwing up. And he bought me a slice of pizza, and he said, "Aaron, I'm never going to do this again. I feel really bad about pulling that, giving you that, And I remember Tony was becoming a junkie at that point, and he was saying that he didn't morally feel right giving me the dope. And for some reason, even though the first couple times I didn't really like the buzz, I kept doing it because there was this weird thing that would happen when you get high where, you'd be watching TV and you would hear words coming out of the TV, like they'd be talking about pain relief or something about aspirin, and I'd think I was hearing about something else, It was almost like a decoded message was coming out. And that's what, part of what drove me into this whole thing. After Jenny got pregnant with supposedly my kid, although she was turning tricks, I found out later, supposedly turning tricks for drugs. I left and went home to Cincinnati. I felt very wounded and hurt inside. And I went back to my life in Cincinnati. I started drinking cough syrup and eating pills. Try to figure out what it was that attracted me. and all that. And then I became addicted. Initially just wanted to use some pills. But I became addicted to those, and eventually the pills weren't enough. It had to be heroin. That was the only thing that was giving me that real intense high that I was looking for. That escape from the world. I'd have to have a shot in the morning. It's like you shot at lunch, or shot before I went to bed. There was a whole matrix that involved. You couldn't get as high as doctor told me. Hospitals, they have to give me more pain medicine. And that would happen. I'd shoot up at night. I'd do a bag and I wouldn't feel it. And I knew that if I held off and did it in the morning was when I really enjoyed doing it. Because I'd wake up and feel just terrible. Your fingers would ache, your teeth would ache, your hair would ache, everything would ache. And you do a shot, and all of a sudden it was just like you get this feeling inside like a roller coaster, and you would just feel sick. And it was like somebody just whacked you with feelings. All of a sudden you were just like, oh. It was as if all this pain was just thrown out of you, and it was then that I really enjoyed. I loved waking up in the morning, the ritual, preparing the shot, and doing it. You'd always be afraid that you'd miss it because the rush wouldn't be as good and maybe you'd get an abscess. And when you did get it right, there was just. I can remember doing a shot of some morphine, using a very big syringe that I stole from a veterinarian. And after I did the shot, I pulled out the large syringe, 12-gauge syringe or something. Blood was just dripping out of my arm, and it was dripping onto the floor. And the blood felt cold. My whole body felt cold. I felt dead inside. It hurt, but the pain almost was enjoyable. I remember sitting there, just feeling my blood drip on the floor, and thinking, God, my blood looks dark and it feels cold. I felt dead. And for some sick reason, it felt good being dead at that point.